Welcome. We are on our weekly learning of the book of Mishlei, the book of Proverbs. We are up to chapter 5. Chapter 5 in the book of Proverbs, where once again King Solomon, as so typical to this book of Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, King Solomon speaks about the importance of wisdom, and yet he does it in a way that a father would do to a child. He starts off with the word beni. He starts speaking with the word beni, my son. So King Solomon starts off and he says, Beni lechochmati hakshiva. So chapter 5, he starts, my son, listen to my wisdom, litvunati hatoznecha, listen to what I have to say. Lishmor mezimot v'dat sfatecha insoru. It teaches you to keep wisdom, and your lips will be able to contain some wisdom. And I just wanted to speak for a moment about a very interesting historical episode. In the 1940s, there was a very popular organization in the United States. It was called the German American Bund. And it was essentially a pro-Nazi, pro-Germany political organization. And obviously, with that came a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism. Interestingly, its headquarters were very close to here. They were on 85th Street. It's interesting because that was their headquarters, and it's very close. In fact, it was across the street from where one of America's greatest and oldest synagogues is KJ, and it was across the street from there. So, can you imagine you going to synagogue in 1939? You have on the one side of the street a synagogue, on the other side of this Nazi headquarters. Anyhow, they were rising in their popularity. They were rising in power, and there were various Jewish attempts to counter them. And one organization that was put together actually by a Jewish judge from New York, a Supreme Court Jewish judge, was they called themselves the Minutemen, and they were popular in New York and in Newark, New Jersey, and they were very popular in terms of fighting and countering the threat of the rising threat of Nazism in America. So, why does this connect to this verse? Lishmor mezimot. Sometimes the greatness of wisdom is to be able to contain your own wisdom, and other times it's to be able to contain the wisdom of others, and to being able to not divulge a secret, not share something that's someone else's personal information, is in and of itself a show of intelligence, a show of wisdom. And that's what King Solomon says. If you listen to my wisdom, if you listen to what I have to say, then it will allow you to both retain wisdom and keep the wisdom that you learn, but it will also allow you to preserve the secrets and the intimate facts that you don't want others to share. So Lishmo Mezimot, King Solomon says, it's going to allow you to keep the words of wisdom, v'dat sfatecha and so, and they will be able to preserve the wisdom that you are studying. That is in terms of wisdom. Again, it reminds me of a great historical episode. I see we have someone joining us from Krakow. What a privilege! The great city of the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, the great Jewish commentator, is buried to this day in Krakow. His synagogue is in Krakow, and his commentary appears in every single Jewish home in the Shulchan Aruch. So very, very important city. So he says, "Lishmor mezimot v'dat sfatecha ein soru." King Solomon continues in verse 3, "Ki nofet titofna siftei zara v'chalak mishemen chika." The importance of wisdom is to be able to discern and between what's wise and unwise, and protect yourself from being taken into the wrong path. Interestingly, King Solomon compares wisdom to the faithful wife, and he compares heresy and sin to the sinful woman that's seducing the man to betray his faithful wife. And so King Solomon says you have to take two lessons. One is to remain faithful to your own wife, and the other is to be careful from this one that is trying to get you to go astray. And here he goes into everything that you have to resist. sometimes the lips of the seductive women can be very persuasive. V'chalak mishem chika, it can be smooth, it can be seductive, it can seem like sinning is a good idea. It would make a person get drawn after it, right? How many times have we seen people with the most beautiful families, with the most wonderful wives, and some silliness, some momentary temptation gets them to destroy all of that by succumbing to temptation and a strange woman. And so King Solomon says, yes, it may seem temptation may seem like a worthy and uh, rewarding thing at the beginning, but it is something that at the end leads to very destructive and painful, bitter consequences. V'acharitam maraka la'ana. There's food. I don't know if anyone has this with wasabi or other kinds of foods where you eat it, and originally when you eat it, it's not so bad, and then when you wait a bit, then it really hits you, right? There's all these foods that could be sharp only later. And so King Solomon says that the sin sometimes is sweet, it's tasteful, it's you go for it, you say, oh wow, this looks like a good idea, and you won't get the bitter consequences until much, much later. So that's what King Solomon is saying. For those joining us now, we're in Proverbs chapter 5, verse 4. So King Solomon is saying that sin often seems sweet, rewarding, and tempting at the beginning, but yet when you actually swallow it, a few moments later, you're going to discover how bitter it is. So King Solomon says, "Acharitam marak la'ana." Its ending can be as bitter as this food, which is very flavorful at the beginning, but then it really strikes you as very, very sharp. Chada kecherev piot, and sin can be as sharp as a cherev piot. Interestingly, the term cherev piot, this kind of sword, is mentioned a lot in the Bible because it was a sword that I hate to say this, but it was a sword that would open up. So it would stab someone, which would be bad enough, but then once it was in, it really did much more damage. And so, same idea is with temptation. When someone succumbs to temptation, they originally may get a little poke, but actually it's deadly and destructive. Raglea yordot mavet sheol tzadei tmochu. Its feet is going to lead you to death, and its steps are going to securely bring you to absolute destruction. Uh, verse 5. Now, this is a very famous verse. You ever wonder why the Torah doesn't say what the reward is for good deeds? You ever wonder why sometimes you have a deed that seems like it should be very important, and yet there's no reward listed? It doesn't say you're going to get this reward for doing this. And so the question the King Solomon is dealing with here is, why is it that there's no description? Why is the Torah not more rewarding? Why doesn't it say, the commandment of being honest? Wow, that is one that will reward you well in life. The commandment of uh, eating kosher, that's very important. It doesn't say that. And so, Orach Chaim Pentefales, the rabbis say the reason Hashem did not tell us the reward for some deeds and he did for the others is so that a person shouldn't say, oh, well, this is a mitzvah that has a great deal of reward for it, and therefore I'm going to do it. Well, this doesn't have a great reward, so I'm not going to do it. So God purposefully kept the reward for commandments ambiguous because God wanted to make sure that we do all of them, right? Uh, you don't want to tell everyone what the exact reward or lack thereof is for everything and that way people will not keep everything. So you want to make sure that it's ambiguous. So Orach Chaim Pentefeles, the reason God didn't specify the reward for all the mitzvot is because God wanted to make sure we keep them all. Now maglotea loteda, but you have to know that if you do not plan, if you don't look forward, you will find yourself in a bad situation. Now, how does one avoid the seductive and sinful woman who's taking him away from his faithful wife? Shim'uli. Now, my children, listen to me, Val tasuru me'imrepi, and do not remove yourself from the words of my mouth. Harchek me'aleh darakecha. Get your path away. In fact, the rabbis say there's two places that not only is a person not allowed to go into, but a person is not even allowed to go on its doorstep and within a few feet of it. And that is, one is the home of Avodah Zarah. A person cannot go within a few feet of a home for idolatry. And the second is a place of seduction, of sin, that also a person stays away. So King Solomon says, "Harchek me'aleh darkecha." If you want to avoid sin, don't just avoid the actual sin, but avoid the whole path altogether. Al tikrav el petach beita. Do not come close to its home. Don't even come close to her. Pen titen la'acharim hodecha, lest you give your glory and your dignity to others. Ushnotecha la'achzari, and you will find yourself giving your years to someone who is cruel, and you'll regret it. Penisbeu zarim kochecha, if you'll if you will follow the sinful seduction and temptation, others will inherit your own worth. And you'll find everything that is precious to you in the home of others. So that's something King Solomon says. Be careful if you're going to follow seduction and temptation. Please be aware of it inheriting all of everything that you have and all of your rewards. And when you'll realize that, it's already going to be too late. V'nahamta b'acharitecha, you will moan from the depths of your heart. You ever see someone injured, deeply injured in a movie or something where they're like moaning and groaning from really the depths of their heart? Bichlot b'sarcha v'sherecha, you will cry out when your flesh is completely consumed and regret not listening to those who rewarded you. That brings us to the conclusion of our Mishlei series. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will have other series going, but at this point, this is our last Mishlei class. So I'd like to thank everyone who's been here, everyone who's listened, and taken time for studying Torah. Be'ezrat Hashem, everyone should have a Shabbat Shalom and a good week.